If you looked at our lives from the outside, you'd think we were fine. We had a 2-story house in Portland, a 15-year marriage, a teenage daughter who actually liked us most days, and a golden retriever named Scout who greeted everyone like they were family. From the outside, it looked like stability. But sometimes, stability just means you've stopped asking questions. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything started to crack. Ethan was in the shower, getting ready for work, and his phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't touch it. I trusted him at least, I used to. But this time, it wasn't just a text preview. It was a sentence that froze me. Last night was dangerous but perfect. I stared at it. The number wasn't saved, but the tone wasn't friendly. My first instinct wasn't anger, it was disbelief. There had to be an explanation. We'd been married for 15 years. He was the guy who forgot his wallet at home and drove back 20 minutes just to pay for gas. He was supposed to be boringly honest. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, I asked, "Who texted you?" He glanced at the phone, smirked, and said, "Oh, that. You're overreacting. It's just a text." Just a text. Those 3 words hit harder than the message itself. The way he said it, calm, dismissive, like I was the one losing it, made something shift in me. Not just doubt. Something quieter and colder. I laughed it off because I didn't know what else to do. "Right," I said. "Just a text." But that sentence wouldn't leave me alone. Later that night, he kissed my forehead before bed like he always did. His phone was face down on the nightstand. He'd never done that before. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, realizing how silence could scream louder than words. The next few days were a slow burn. Ethan started working late. His shirt smelled like cologne I didn't recognize. He bought a new jacket, the kind that looks casual but costs too much. When I asked how work was, he said, "Busy," and changed the subject. Every lie sounds the same when you've lived with honesty too long. One evening, while he showered again, apparently our big moments only happened near plumbing, I picked up his phone. This time, it was locked. Passcode changed. I put it down and whispered, "Okay." Not out of defeat, but decision. The next morning, he kissed me goodbye and said he'd be late again. I smiled and said, "Of course." Then I watched his taillights fade down the street and felt something inside me settle, not peace, not anger, just clarity. At work, I couldn't focus. My students were making clay models, and I was standing there shaping a heart out of red clay that kept breaking in the middle. Maybe that was poetic, but it felt more like foreshadowing. That evening, our daughter Chloe came home from soccer and asked, "Mom, why does Dad come home after dinner now?" I smiled too fast. "He's busy with a new client." "Then why did he say he was at a conference last night?" she asked, tilting her head. My heart stopped. "He told you that?" She shrugged. "Yeah. He called when I was doing homework, said not to wait up." That was the moment I knew the lie wasn't an accident. It was a system. After Chloe went upstairs, I sat in the kitchen with a glass of wine, staring at the clock. 9:47 p.m. I thought about calling him, but what would I say? "Hey, just wondering which woman you're lying to tonight." I didn't call. I just listened to the silence of a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. The next morning, while packing his lunch like nothing was wrong, I found a receipt tucked in his jacket pocket. A restaurant downtown I'd never heard of, 2 entrees, 1 bottle of wine, date stamped the night he said he was at a work event. I took a photo of it. Not to confront him, at least not yet. I just wanted something real, proof that I wasn't crazy. That night, when he walked through the door, smiling like nothing had happened, I asked, "How was dinner with the team?" He froze for half a second before answering, "Good, productive." "Must have been," I said. "That's an expensive bottle of wine for a work night." His face changed just a flicker, but I saw it. Then came that same calm, rehearsed tone. "You're reading into things again, Liv. You really need to stop doing this." There it was, the gaslight, smooth, polished, and cruelly gentle. I looked at him and smiled, but it wasn't the same kind of smile anymore. It was the kind you give someone who's already told you the ending, and you're just watching the rerun. "Sure," I said. "You're right. I should stop. He walked upstairs like he'd won something. But the truth was, that was the last time I ever questioned my instincts. Because when a man laughs while calling you crazy, that's the exact moment he realizes you're not. If you've ever been told you're overreacting when your gut said otherwise, tell me in the comments. I read every story. And if you love real-life cheating stories and revenge stories where truth wins in the end, hit subscribe, you'll want to see how this one unfolds. Scout barked at something outside, breaking the silence. I looked at the reflection of my face in the kitchen window, calm, steady, unreadable, and thought, fine. If he wanted to play it cool, so could I. The next morning started with burnt toast and silence. Ethan scrolled through his phone at the kitchen table like nothing had happened. I watched him, waiting to see if he'd even look up. He didn't. He just mumbled, "Traffic's bad today," and left. That was the first lie of the day. I stood at the sink, staring at the empty driveway. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from that new kind of fear, the one you feel when you know the truth, but can't prove it yet. At work, everything looked normal. The other teachers laughed over coffee, kids yelled down the hallway, and I smiled at all of them. Inside, though, it felt like I was watching my own life from the outside. During lunch, I caught myself typing, "Signs your husband is cheating," into Google, then deleted it before hitting enter. It was pathetic, I thought. People like me weren't supposed to end up in that search bar. That night, Ethan came home late again, smelling like a mix of whiskey and a lie. He kissed my cheek and said, "Work dinner, you'd have been bored." "Who was there?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "The whole team. Don't start again, Liv." There it was, that tone, the one that said I'm the problem. I wanted to scream, but instead I asked, "Did Vanessa go?" His fork paused for half a second before he said, "Why would she?" That half second was all I needed. We ate in silence. He finished his meal, rinsed his plate, and kissed my forehead again like everything was fine. I waited until I heard him snoring before I got up and sat on the couch, staring at the glow of his laptop charger in the dark. Every sound in the house felt louder than usual. I realized I was listening for proof. A week passed like that, me pretending, him pretending better. Then one night, he forgot his work bag in the car, and I heard the faint ping of his phone left inside. I walked out into the drizzle, opened the passenger door, and froze when I saw the screen. Vanessa's name. The message read, "I can't stop thinking about you." He didn't even bother deleting them. The stupidity almost made me laugh. I took a picture, slipped the phone back where it was, and went inside. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. The next morning, I made pancakes like it was any other Sunday. Over breakfast, he looked at me and said, "You're quiet." "Just tired," I said. He smiled. "You need to stop worrying so much. You always assume the worst." I met his eyes. "Maybe I just noticed the worst before it happens." He chuckled, the kind of fake laugh you give when you think you're still in control. "You're overreacting again, Liv." There it was, the same line, delivered like gospel. And for the first time, I didn't flinch. Because I finally understood something. Gaslighting only works when you care about being believed. That night, I called Tessa. She'd been my best friend since college, and unlike Ethan, she never made me feel small for asking questions. "Start keeping records," she said. "Records?" "Receipts, messages, dates, everything. Don't confront him yet. Just document." Tessa, "I'm not trying to destroy him." "You're not," she said. "You're protecting yourself." The next day, I started. I opened a new folder on my laptop labeled Budget. Inside it, I saved screenshots of messages, bank statements, and receipts from restaurants he never took me to. I also downloaded our phone bill and highlighted every call between him and Vanessa. It felt clinical, detached. I wasn't the crying wife in a movie. I was an investigator building a case. Every file I saved made me a little calmer. That evening, Chloe came into my room holding her tablet. "Mom, did you and Dad have a fight?" "Why do you ask?" "He was on the phone with someone and said you're being dramatic again." I smiled softly. "No fight, sweetheart. Just grown-up stuff." After she left, I stared at the wall for a long time. Dramatic. Overreacting. Those words had been sharpened into weapons I didn't even see coming. But now I did. And that changed everything. The next day, I caught him standing outside talking on the phone, whispering like a teenager. When he came in, I asked who it was. He smiled that calm, patronizing smile again. "It's work, Liv. Stop acting crazy." I laughed this time. It startled him. He didn't expect that. "Something funny?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I finally get the joke." He frowned, confused, then grabbed his keys and left without another word. The front door slammed, echoing through the house like punctuation. I sat on the couch, the quiet stretching around me like a blank page. I realized that I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd stopped hoping he'd tell the truth. That part of me was gone. And what replaced it was steady, calm, and ready for whatever came next. The next morning, when his car pulled out of the driveway, I poured myself coffee, opened my laptop, and created a new document. The title was simple: Proof. The day I opened his iPad, it wasn't curiosity that drove me, it was silence. Ethan had left for work in a hurry, and the house was still. His coffee cup sat half full on the counter, his phone forgotten on the charger. For the first time in weeks, the devices that guarded his secrets were all within reach. I picked up the iPad. No passcode. He must have assumed I'd never look. I didn't even have to search. The first notification slid across the screen. "Vanessa Cole, I still smell like you." My stomach dropped. The words looked casual, but they hit like a car crash. I scrolled, half afraid, half numb. More messages followed: photos, inside jokes, nicknames I'd never heard before. My husband, the man who said, "It's just a text," had an entire second life, and it fit neatly between his meetings and morning runs. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe for a moment. Then I took screenshots, every one of them. I emailed them to myself, labeled work receipts. I remember thinking how absurd it was to hide truth under a name like that. That evening, I made dinner like nothing had happened. Ethan came home in a good mood, kissed my cheek, poured a drink. I watched him joke with Chloe about her math test and realized he was good at this pretending. When she went upstairs, I said, "You and Vanessa seem close." He froze mid-sip, then smiled. "Oh, for God's sake, Liv. Are we really doing this?" "I'm just asking. She's new at work. She needed help adjusting." "Adjusting to what exactly?" He sighed. "You're blowing things up again. You always do this." There it was, his favorite tactic. Flip the script. Make me the problem. It worked before. Not anymore. I just nodded and said, "Okay." He looked confused by how calm I was. Then, almost defensive, he added, "I'm tired of being accused of things I haven't done." "I didn't accuse you," I said. "I asked a question." He left the kitchen muttering something about needing space. I stood at the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. The lies didn't hurt as much as the performance. Later that night, I went for a walk. Portland rain drizzled over the streetlights, soft and cold. My reflection stared back at me from every wet window. Same woman, different story. By the time I got home, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him again. I was going to collect evidence until I didn't need words. For the next week, I became invisible. I checked statements, synced accounts, tracked calendar invites. Ethan had dinner meetings 3 times in 8 days, all at the same restaurant, Harper and Pine. I looked it up: romantic, dim lights, couples everywhere. Not exactly a place for quarterly reviews. He didn't notice the shift in me. Why would he? He thought I was still doubting myself, but doubt had already turned into clarity. One night, as he got dressed for another client dinner, Chloe was doing homework at the table. She asked, "Dad, are you going with Vanessa again?" The silence that followed said everything. He smiled too wide. "No, sweetheart. It's work." I caught her eye, and in that second, I saw the realization forming in her young face, the one I'd been avoiding. Children know when something's off. They always do. After he left, I tucked Chloe into bed, then sat in the dark living room. The TV flickered quietly, but I wasn't watching. I was memorizing the sound of the garage door closing, the fading hum of his car. Every exit felt like a rehearsal for the day he wouldn't come back. The next morning, he left his jacket hanging on the chair. I found a hotel keycard in the pocket. Room 214. No name, no date, just a plastic reminder that lies have addresses. I placed it back exactly where I found it. That evening, I met Tessa after work. We sat in her office surrounded by law books and quiet confidence. She listened without interrupting. When I showed her the screenshots, she said, "You've got everything you need." "For what?" I asked. "For control." The word stuck with me. Control. I hadn't felt that in months. She leaned forward. "Don't confront him yet. When people like Ethan realize they're losing power, they make noise. Stay quiet. Silence makes them nervous." That night, I did exactly that. Ethan came home late again, tossed his jacket on the chair, and kissed my forehead like I was furniture. "You okay?" he asked. "Perfect," I said. He smiled, relieved, and walked upstairs. I waited until I heard the shower running before opening my laptop. I created a new folder, titled it Plan B, and started uploading everything I had. The sound of water kept going upstairs, steady, confident, careless. I stared at the screen, watching the files load one by one, and realized I wasn't the same woman who read that first text. Something had changed quietly, completely, and there was no turning back. The next morning started like a scene from a life that no longer existed. Ethan stood in front of the mirror, tying his tie with that same effortless confidence that used to make me proud. I watched from the doorway, noticing how he whistled while he worked like a man who had never been caught. He smiled at me through the reflection. "Big day. 2 presentations. Don't wait up." It was the same sentence he'd said twice that week, the same one he used to keep me quiet. I just nodded, poured coffee, and kissed his cheek. He smelled like the cologne Vanessa once gave him as a Christmas gift from the team. Back then, I thought it was thoughtful. Now, it smelled like a punchline. When the door closed behind him, the house dropped into silence again, the kind that hums inside your ears. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the photos I'd taken, the texts, the receipts, the hotel keycard. There was no longer any doubt, only data. That's when I realized something simple but devastating. I had proof of the betrayal, but no idea what to do with it yet. At school, I went through the motions. My students were painting landscapes, and one girl, Emma, asked, "Miss Grant, why do adults always look so tired?" I almost laughed. If only she knew. "Because adults forget to take naps," I said, forcing a smile. By the time I got home, the sky was gray. Portland in midwinter has a way of matching your mood without asking. Ethan's car wasn't in the driveway. He'd texted earlier, "Late dinner with clients, don't wait up." I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I finally did. I set my phone down and poured a glass of wine. Then I pulled out my laptop. I didn't open social media or emails. I opened a blank document and wrote a name, Vanessa Cole. If he could turn our marriage into a project, so could I. It started with simple searches. LinkedIn, Facebook, company website. She had a smile that looked practiced, sweet enough to sell houses, sharp enough to sell lies. I clicked through photo after photo. Work parties, brunches, a few snapshots from charity galas where Ethan's arm appeared just at the edge of the frame. Every detail painted the same picture. 2 people who'd built a private world just far enough from the truth to feel safe. At 9:47 p.m., headlights swept across the living room. He was home. I closed the laptop and went back to the kitchen, pretending to be mid-cleanup. He walked in, loosened his tie, and smiled like nothing in the world was wrong. "Hey, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. "Long day?" "Same as usual," I said, rinsing a glass. "How was dinner?" He hesitated just long enough to make it obvious. "Good." "Productive." I handed him a towel. "Productive in business or pleasure?" He froze. "Excuse me?" I turned to face him, calm, deliberate. I asked a question. "Jesus, Liv, can we not do this? You're imagining things again." I stared at him, that perfectly polished lie rolling off his tongue like a script he'd memorized. "You really should stop using that line," I said. "It's getting old." He slammed the towel on the counter. "You've got to stop digging for problems that aren't there." Arse down. They're there, I said softly. You just don't like how deep I've been digging. He looked at me like I'd crossed an invisible line. You're starting to sound crazy. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just stopped pretending. He opened his mouth to say something, then stopped. That flicker of hesitation, the tiny moment he didn't know what to say, told me I'd hit a nerve. After he went upstairs, I sat at the table with the lights off. The house was quiet except for the creak of floorboards above me. Every sound felt amplified, like the whole house was holding its breath. I wasn't angry anymore, just awake. I could see every lie he'd told me sitting on the table like puzzle pieces that finally fit together. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. I made his lunch, packed Chloe's backpack, and waved goodbye from the porch. When his car disappeared around the corner, I went back inside and called Tessa. Is it still gaslighting if you can see right through it? I asked. It's still manipulation, she said. He's testing how much you'll tolerate. Don't give him a map. That afternoon, I printed everything, the messages, the receipts, the call logs. I slid them into a manila folder and tucked it into my art portfolio at school. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years of creating things, and the first time my work might change my life, it wasn't art, it was evidence. When I got home, Ethan was already there, smiling like a man in control. Dinner's ready, he said. I ordered Thai. Perfect, I said, sitting down. I smiled back, and for the first time, it felt like I was the one performing. He poured wine and said, See, this is nice. No tension. Sure, I said, meeting his eyes. Let's enjoy the calm while it lasts. He raised an eyebrow, maybe unsure what I meant. But I knew he'd think about it later. I wanted him to. Because the calm wasn't peace anymore, it was preparation. When people talk about manipulation, they imagine shouting or guilt trips. Ethan didn't need either. He weaponized calm. The quieter I became, the more confident he got. One Friday night, he came home late again. I was sitting on the couch grading papers. He tossed his keys in the bowl and said, You're still up? Yeah, I said, eyes on the papers. How was the client dinner? Good. Productive. That same word again, productive. I wondered if Vanessa ever realized how predictable he was. He loosened his tie and poured himself a drink. You know, he said, you've been really distant lately. It's not a good look. I looked up. You think I'm doing this for appearances? I think you've been overthinking everything. You need to relax. I wanted to laugh. Relax. Like it was my job to make his lies feel comfortable. He sat beside me and put his hand on my knee. Liv, I love you. You're my wife. Don't turn small things into big ones. Small things? I said. Like secret dinners, private texts, hotel keycards? He froze. Just for a second. Then the smile returned. You've been snooping through my things? I found what you left lying around. Jesus, Liv, this is why I don't tell you everything. You twist things. He stood, his voice rising just enough to make it clear who he wanted to sound unbalanced. You have to stop creating problems that don't exist. I are too. The old me would have apologized to keep the peace. This version just stared at him and said quietly, Then stop giving me evidence. He grabbed his jacket and slammed the door on his way out. The sound echoed through the house long after his car disappeared. When I went to bed, I couldn't sleep. Not because of heartbreak, because of strategy. Every time he called me paranoid, he gave me one more reason to prove I wasn't. The next morning, Chloe asked, Where's Dad? Went to clear his head, I said, buttering her toast. She shrugged, unfazed. He's been doing that a lot. I smiled, but inside I felt something twist. Kids always know. They just don't have the words for it. That afternoon, I met Tessa for coffee. She listened as I told her about the argument. He's flipping the script, she said. Classic control tactic. You can't reason with someone who's invested in confusing you. And for one. So what do? You do nothing emotional. You document everything. Quietly, calmly. You play the long game. The phrase long game stuck with me. I'd spent years thinking marriage was a team sport. Turns out I'd been in a chess match. That night, Ethan came home acting like nothing had happened. Dinner? He asked cheerfully. as if shouting at me 24 hours ago was just a bad dream. "Sure," I said, keeping my tone light. We ate in silence for a while. He poured himself wine and said, "See? This is better. You get so worked up, and then everything feels worse than it is." "Worse than it is," I repeated. "You think I exaggerate." He smiled. "You always have. You feel things too deeply." That was his favorite trick, make my emotions sound like character flaws. I didn't respond. Silence unnerved him more than anger ever did. Later that night, I found him asleep on the couch, with his phone half under a cushion. It was risky, but I didn't care. I picked it up, opened the message thread with Vanessa, and found the latest one. "Same place tomorrow? I'll wear the red dress you like." I sent it to my email and set the phone back where it was. The next day, while he was at work, I opened my laptop and built a folder titled Project Red Dress. Inside it, I dropped everything: texts, receipts, screenshots. Then I added a subfolder labeled Legal. Tessa had already told me what to collect: dates, times, patterns. Proof of adultery meant leverage in court. When Chloe came home from practice, she noticed the papers spread across the table. "Are you working on school stuff?" "Sort of," I said. "Adult homework." She grinned. "That sounds awful." "It's necessary," I replied. And for once, it didn't sound bitter. That night, Ethan showed up early with flowers. "Peace offering," he said. "Let's reset." I took the bouquet, smelled it, and smiled. "They're beautiful." He relaxed. "Good. I just hate when we fight." "I do too," I said, placing them in a vase. Then I added, "Next time bring lilies. These wilt too fast." He laughed, but I saw confusion flicker behind his eyes. He could feel it, the shift. The woman who used to beg for explanations wasn't standing in front of him anymore. Later, when he kissed me goodnight, I almost pitied him. He thought the calm meant surrender. It didn't. It meant precision. As he fell asleep, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, memorizing every sound in the room: the hum of the air conditioner, his steady breathing, the faint drip from the bathroom faucet. I wanted to remember what it felt like the night before everything changed, because I knew the next move was mine, and I wasn't going to waste it. The next morning, I woke up before Ethan. The sun hadn't even touched the blinds yet, but my mind was already awake, sharp, deliberate. I moved quietly, like someone performing surgery on her own life. His phone was charging on the nightstand, face down, as usual. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I already knew enough to destroy the illusion he lived in. Now it was about precision. I brewed coffee, fed Scout, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. My hands didn't shake anymore. I opened the folder labeled Project Red Dress and added a new file: Financial Patterns. Ethan's client dinners weren't cheap. Between meal receipts, Uber charges, and hotel stays, he'd spent over $3,000 in 6 weeks. None of it matched our joint account withdrawals. He was using a secondary credit card, the one we opened for work emergencies. I copied every statement, screenshot, and charge, labeling them by date. Then, I printed the receipts and laid them out across the table, each one like a breadcrumb in his trail of deceit. Around 7, Ethan came downstairs, yawning. "You're up early." "And couldn't sleep," I said without looking up. He kissed the top of my head. "You worry too much, Liv. You need to let things go." I smiled faintly. "I'm learning to." He didn't hear the tone beneath it. He never did. After he left for work, I called Tessa. "It's worse than I thought," I said. She didn't sound surprised. "Of course it is. Men like Ethan don't dip their toes, they dive in head first. You ready to take action?" "Not yet," I said. "I want him to think I still believe him. The quieter I am, the more careless he gets." "That's the spirit," she said. "Silence is underrated." By noon, I was sitting in my car outside his office building. It wasn't a plan. It was instinct. The parking lot buzzed with movement suits, briefcases, small talk. Then I saw her. Vanessa Cole, the woman behind the red dress. She wasn't just pretty, she was polished. Perfect hair, perfect posture, that effortless confidence of someone who believed she'd won something. She got out of her car, phone pressed to her ear, And I swear I heard her laugh before the door shut. It was the same kind of laugh I used to have before everything turned into strategy. I didn't get out. I just watched. She walked into the building, unaware that her name lived in a folder on my desktop labeled Proof. That night, Ethan came home early, carrying takeout. "Thought I'd surprise you," he said, placing the bag on the counter. "Pad Thai again?" I asked. He grinned. "You love it." "I do," I said, unwrapping the containers. "It's always better when you pick it up yourself." He froze for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Vanessa worked 5 minutes from that restaurant. We ate dinner together like a couple in a commercial. He talked about work. I nodded at all the right moments, but inside I was dissecting every word, every pause, every smirk. When he said "we" about a project, I wondered which "we" he meant. After dinner, he went upstairs to shower. I stayed at the table, opening my laptop again. This time, I added a folder called Digital Evidence. I uploaded the new screenshots, receipts, and a spreadsheet with timestamps from his GPS tracking data pulled directly from our family's shared account. He'd forgotten that his phone's Find My feature was still linked to mine. Every time he claimed to be at work dinners, his location pinged somewhere else. Hotels, side streets, parking lots. One was even a coffee shop at midnight. It was almost impressive how consistent he was at being unfaithful. The more I documented, the calmer I felt. It wasn't revenge, it was arithmetic. Every lie had a value, every moment of deceit a timestamp. When he came downstairs in sweatpants, smiling like the man I used to love, he said, "You're on your laptop again? Grading papers?" "Yeah," I said, glancing up. "Just organizing things." He leaned in to kiss my forehead. "Don't stay up too late." "How wo?" "I won't," I replied. And I didn't, at least. Not for grading. I spent the next few hours syncing everything to a cloud drive under a fake name. Then I made a backup USB and tucked it into the back of my art supply box. If Ethan ever found it, he'd think it was paint samples. The next day, he mentioned a weekend business trip. San Diego. "Conference," he said. "Who's going?" I asked casually. "Just me," he said. "Don't worry so much, Liv." I smiled and packed his suitcase, neatly folding shirts he didn't deserve. When I zipped it shut, I slipped a tiny AirTag between the lining and the fabric. He kissed me goodbye the next morning, whispering, "You're the best wife in the world." I smiled back. "I know." As his car disappeared down the street, I sat on the couch with my coffee and opened the tracking app. A blinking dot moved south on I-5, away from Portland. It wasn't heading toward a conference. It was heading toward the coast. The phone buzzed on the table, Tessa's text lighting up the screen. "You good?" I typed back. "Better than ever." Then I took a sip of coffee, watched the little blue dot keep moving, and felt something new take root inside me. It wasn't rage anymore. It was control, quiet, deliberate, and absolutely certain. The morning he left for that conference, the house smelled like coffee and lies. Ethan wore his favorite navy suit, the one he saved for important events like pretending to be faithful. He kissed my cheek before walking out the door, and for the first time, I didn't feel that familiar ache when the car disappeared down the street. I just waited for the truth to confirm itself. By noon, I checked the tracking app. The blinking dot that was supposed to be heading south toward San Diego had stopped at the Dunes Resort, a coastal hotel 3 hours west. I'd never been there, but I knew it. A romantic getaway spot with ocean view suites and honeymoon packages. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the map. For a moment, I just laughed. Quiet, hollow, almost peaceful laughter. It wasn't shock anymore, it was confirmation. Every instinct, every sleepless night, every "you're overreacting" had led right there. I texted Tessa. "He's at a resort, not a conference." Her reply came fast. "Good. Don't move yet. Let him bury himself first." So I waited. I went to work, taught my classes, smiled at my students. No one would have guessed that between lessons on geometry and art theory, I was watching my husband cheat in real time. That evening, after dinner, I opened my laptop again. The AirTag showed the same location. Room 207. I searched the resort website. It even had photos of the exact room type. King bed, balcony, champagne glasses in every image. Subtlety clearly wasn't his thing. The next morning, a charge appeared on our credit card. Harborview Restaurant, 180, $4.50, 2 cents. I looked it up. Waterfront dining for couples, complete with a sunset lovers menu. I almost admired the effort. Later that day, a message came in from Ethan. Conference going great. Might stay an extra night. Don't wait up. Love you. The kind of lie that's so casual, it almost sounds polite. I didn't reply. Instead, I emailed the photos, receipts, and location logs to my private account with one line in the subject. For when he says I'm overreacting, by Saturday morning, I decided to see it for myself. Not a confrontation, just observation. I told Chloe I had a school meeting and drove 3 hours to the coast. The resort sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean, the kind of place where people take pictures of champagne instead of sunsets. I parked in the lot and waited. The air smelled like salt and expensive perfume. Around 11 a.m., Ethan walked out of the lobby, hand in hand with Vanessa. She was wearing sunglasses, but I knew her face by heart. He held her the way he used to hold me lightly, like she was made of glass. They laughed, kissed, and walked to their car. I stayed in mine, perfectly still. No rage, just that strange calm again. They drove off toward town, probably for brunch. I followed at a distance, keeping enough space that they'd never notice. They stopped at a cafe. She leaned across the table, touching his hand. He smiled in that easy, confident way I used to love. Watching it now felt like watching a rerun of a show that used to make you cry but now just makes you roll your eyes. After a while, they left. I took photos not because I needed them, but because I wanted every piece of his performance documented. Every laugh, every lie, every perfect detail. Proof didn't just tell the truth, it silenced his excuses. On the drive home, the Pacific stretched out beside me, cold and endless. I didn't cry once. Somewhere between the waves and the highway, I realized I wasn't mourning him. I was grieving the woman who believed him. When I got home, Scout ran up wagging his tail, and Chloe yelled from the kitchen, "Mom, did your meeting go okay?" I smiled. Better than expected. That night, I transferred all the photos to my external drive. The evidence folder was getting heavy, like a digital truth bomb waiting to drop. Tessa called while I was labeling files. "You saw them?" she asked. "I did. And I felt nothing." She laughed softly. "That's how you know you're done." Ethan came home the next evening, sunburned and smiling like a man returning from success. "You should have seen the conference center," he said. "Beautiful place." "Harborview was nice too, I heard," I said, pouring coffee. He froze. Just a flicker. Then he laughed. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing," I said, handing him his cup. "Just checking your schedule." He took a sip, pretending not to taste the panic. Then he smiled again, too wide, too forced. "You really need to stop watching those true crime shows." I smiled back. "You're right. Real-life stranger." He left the room, and I stared at the doorway, realizing that I'd finally taken back something he thought he owned my awareness. That night, as the house went dark, I saved the last set of photos into the folder and whispered to myself, "Not overreacting, just done pretending." Then I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and let silence fill the space where love used to live. When Monday rolled around, Ethan walked into the kitchen with that fake morning brightness, like nothing could ever touch his perfect world. "Big week," he said, sipping his coffee. "Presentations, client meetings, lots of moving parts." Yeah, I replied, pretending to be half asleep. "You always make it look easy." He smiled. "It's all about balance." Balance. That word landed like a joke I wasn't supposed to laugh at. I watched him walk out the door, briefcase in hand, confident as ever. I had already stopped seeing him as a husband. He was just a project that needed to finish itself. That afternoon, while grading papers in the staff lounge, my phone buzzed. The screen flashed. "Tessa, urgent." I stepped into the hallway. "What's going on?" She sounded calm but sharp. "You might want to sit down. HR from Redwood Realty just called me. Guess who they're investigating? My hand tightened around the phone. Ethan? Bingo. Apparently, someone sent them an anonymous email with photos and receipts showing he's been inappropriately involved with a coworker during company hours. HR's opening a formal review. I leaned against the wall, the noise of students echoing down the hall. Anonymous, huh? Tessa paused just long enough to smile through the phone. Must have been a very organized Good Samaritan. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That evening, Ethan came home later than usual, still in his suit but looking less sure of himself. Rough day, he muttered, loosening his tie. I stirred the pasta sauce. Oh, work stress? Just stupid office rumors. You know how people talk. Do I? I asked lightly. He frowned. Someone said something about me and Vanessa. Total nonsense. HR's looking into it. That sounds serious, I said, keeping my tone steady. What did you tell them? The truth, he said too quickly. That it's all lies. That some jealous coworker's trying to start drama. Smart approach, I said. Keep it simple. He looked at me then, suspicious. Why do you sound so calm? Because I trust you, I said, smiling just enough to make it sting. He didn't know how to read that. He just stared, then muttered. You've been weird lately. Okay, maybe I'm finally balanced, I said, turning off the stove. That night, after he fell asleep, I checked the company directory. Vanessa's profile was suddenly inactive. HR worked fast. The next morning, he left early, trying to look unfazed. I gave him the performance he expected coffee, a kiss on the cheek, the same quiet wife who overreacted to everything. The irony was delicious. By noon, I got another call from Tessa. They suspended her, she said. Pending further review. Ethan's next. I exhaled slowly. Good. You ready for the fallout? I've been living in it, I said. When Ethan came home that night, his shoulders were heavy. They're taking this too far, he said, pacing. HR wants to see me again tomorrow. It's humiliating. Must be tough, I said softly, pouring him wine. He stopped pacing and looked at me. You don't seem surprised. I met his eyes. What would surprise me at this point? He stared at me for a long moment, like he was trying to solve an equation that no longer added up. Then he shook his head. You've changed, Liv. I know, I said. You taught me how. He slammed the glass on the counter. You think this is funny? No, I said. Just inevitable. He stormed upstairs, muttering curses under his breath. I sat at the table, sipping my wine, listening to the sound of drawers opening and closing as he searched for someone to blame. Later that week, the inevitable happened. HR called him in and placed him on leave pending further evaluation. When he came home that day, he was pale, jaw tight. They said it's about misconduct. Total bullshit. Vanessa's lying to save herself. Is she? I asked, folding laundry. He glared at me. You think I did something? I think you've been doing something for months, I said quietly. You just thought I'd never notice. He laughed short, bitter, desperate. You really are unbelievable. I looked up at him. So are you. He stood there, breathing hard, realizing that I wasn't fighting anymore, and that scared him more than any accusation could. That night, after he left to clear his head, I walked into the living room, sat on the couch, and scrolled through the messages he'd once sworn meant nothing. Every good morning, every can't wait to see you, every you're overreacting. I deleted them all not out of mercy, but because they'd already served their purpose. By the time his car pulled into the driveway, I'd already decided what came next. I wasn't just gathering proof anymore, I was building closure. When he walked through the door, looking defeated, he said, You still love me, right? I met his eyes. I love the idea of who you were, not the man who keeps lying when the truth's already public. He didn't say a word. Just walked upstairs, silent for the first time in months. I sat there in the quiet, realizing that silence wasn't empty anymore. It was freedom stretching out for the first time in years. The morning after Ethan's suspension, the silence in our house felt different. It wasn't tension anymore. It was exposure. The kind of quiet that follows when everyone finally stops pretending. He sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, pretending not to notice how hard it was for him to breathe. I poured coffee and said, You're quiet. He didn't look up. Just thinking. About? He exhaled. About how everything can fall apart overnight. I almost said, it didn't fall apart overnight. It fell apart over months of lies, but I let the silence answer for me. By noon, the news had already spread farther than either of us expected. Redwood Realty was a tight-knit company, and office gossip traveled faster than truth ever could. By lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor. Denise, the kind of woman who somehow knew everything about everyone. Hey Liv, I just heard something weird. Is Ethan okay? People are talking. I didn't reply. Some part of me wanted to defend him out of habit, but that reflex was gone. Instead, I put the phone down and kept folding laundry. For once, I wasn't the one explaining his behavior. By evening, the whispers had spilled past the company walls. One of Chloe's friends' mothers pulled me aside after soccer practice. I'm so sorry, Olivia, she said softly, her voice heavy with sympathy she didn't earn. People can be so cruel. You don't deserve this. I smiled politely, the kind of smile that ends conversations. Thanks, but I'm fine. Because I was. Really. There's a strange power in public humiliation when it isn't yours. When I got home, Ethan was pacing the living room. You wouldn't believe what's happening, he said. They're saying I took advantage of her. Me? Can you believe that? Yes, I said simply, hanging my coat. He froze. You're supposed to be on my side. I was, I said, until you gave me nothing to defend. He pointed at me. This is what they want us turning on each other. Vanessa's blaming me to save herself. HR doesn't even have proof. I laughed. It came out sharper than I expected. Oh, they have proof. Trust me. He blinked. What do you mean? I looked him straight in the eye. I mean, maybe they didn't find it on their own. For a moment, the room stopped breathing. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You did this? I told the truth, I said. You just made it easy to document. His mouth opened, but no words came out. That was the first time I'd seen him speechless since the affair began. He grabbed his keys, muttering something about getting fresh air, and stormed out. I didn't stop him. I just poured myself a glass of wine and watched the porch light flicker in the window. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. It was Denise, of course. She held a plate of brownies and the kind of expression people wear when they want information more than they want to help. Just checking in, she said sweetly. I heard some things from the HOA chat. You know how people talk. I smiled. I do. And they're not wrong. Her eyes widened. Oh, well, if you need anything. I'm good, I said, taking the plate. Really? When she left, I set the brownies on the counter, untouched. For the first time, I realized I didn't care what people said anymore. Let them talk. The truth didn't need defending when it was finally out in the open. Later that night, Ethan came home looking wrecked. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot. You humiliated me, he said quietly. No, I said. You did that all by yourself. I just stopped covering it up. He slumped into a chair. Everyone knows. The neighborhood, the office, even the church group. I know, I said. And now you know what it's like to live honestly. He glared at me, like he was searching for the version of me he used to control, but she wasn't there anymore. The next morning, Chloe walked into the kitchen, holding her phone. Mom, people are saying stuff online, about Dad. I took a deep breath. You don't need to read it. She nodded. I don't want to. I just hate that everyone knows. I know, I said softly, but sometimes the truth doesn't stay private. It's not always a bad thing. She looked at me, confused, but didn't ask more. She didn't have to. That afternoon, Ethan packed a small bag. He didn't say where he was going, and I didn't ask. He stood by the door for a long moment before saying, I don't deserve this. No, I said. You earned it. He walked out without another word, and I let the door close behind him. Outside, the neighbors pretended not to look. Inside, the house finally felt like it belonged to me again, quiet, steady, and honest. When I woke up the next morning, his side of the bed was still untouched. The pillow looked smooth and foreign, like it belonged to a stranger. I didn't feel sadness anymore, Just the kind of clarity that only comes after the noise dies down. The coffee tasted stronger that day. Maybe it was because the air finally felt clean. By the time I finished breakfast, there was a knock on the door. A man in a gray suit stood outside, holding an envelope. "Mrs. Grant?" "Yes." "Service of documents." He handed me the envelope and left without another word. Inside were the divorce papers. Ethan had filed first. Typical. The man cheats, gets caught, and then rushes to look like the victim. Tessa came over later that morning, holding 2 lattes and a box of croissants. She took one look at the papers and smirked. "So he's making it official, huh?" "Apparently, I'm the problem," I said. She sipped her drink. "Good. Let him think that. The more he underestimates you, the easier this gets." I laughed quietly. "You sound like you've done this before." "Please. I've seen enough of it to have a PhD in male delusion." We sat at the table, and she went through every line with a red pen. "He wants half the house," she said, shaking her head. "And spousal support. That's bold for a man who lost his job for sleeping with a coworker." "I think the word you're looking for is stupid," I said. We spent the next hour planning. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building a case. I had evidence, witnesses, and the moral high ground. And unlike him, I had patience. When Ethan came by that evening to talk things through, I was ready. He looked worn out, like guilt had aged him overnight. "Olivia," he started, "we don't have to make this ugly." "Ugly?" I said. "You filmed the trailer, directed the movie, and now you're worried about bad reviews." He sighed. "I just want what's fair." "Fair?" I leaned forward. "You moved money from our joint account to fund your weekend trips, lied about business conferences, and risked your job for an affair. You don't get to redefine fair." He rubbed his forehead. "This isn't you, Liv. You're not like this." "No," I said. "You're right. I used to be the woman who cleaned up your messes. Now I just document them." His eyes darkened. "You're bitter." "Just organized," I said. "It's different." He didn't stay long after that. When the door closed behind him, the quiet wasn't heavy anymore, it was satisfying. The next morning, I called a lawyer, a calm, sharp woman named Julia Benson. She listened to my story without interrupting once, then said, "We'll file a counterclaim for fault-based divorce. Adultery, misuse of marital funds, emotional distress. You'll keep the house and majority custody of your daughter. He won't see this coming." For the first time in months, I smiled without forcing it. "Thank you," I said. Julia nodded. "You don't need revenge, Olivia. You just need the truth to do its job." The paperwork took weeks, but each signature felt lighter than the one before. Ethan tried to delay, to negotiate, to pretend there was still love left to salvage. But the thing about betrayal is it leaves fingerprints everywhere. You can wipe the surface clean, but under the right light, the truth still shines through. When he finally realized he was losing everything, he switched tactics. One evening, he showed up with flowers. Roses, of course. He always used them like band-aids for bullet wounds. "I miss us," he said, standing on the porch. I looked at him for a long second. "You miss control, not me." He frowned. "You've changed." "I had to," I said. "You forced me to grow where you hoped I'd break." He tried to hand me the flowers, but I didn't take them. "You should go, Ethan." He hesitated. "You'll regret this one day." "Maybe," I said, "but at least the regret will be honest." He left the flowers on the porch. I threw them in the trash the moment his car turned the corner. Later that night, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the stack of legal papers neatly arranged on the counter. My name, his name, the word irretrievable. It wasn't tragedy, it was documentation of a finished chapter. When the judge finalized the temporary order, Julia called to tell me the outcome. I'd stay in the house. He'd move out officially. I'd handle the mortgage but keep the property. He'd pay temporary support, and his lawyer had already hinted at dropping his claims. "Congratulations," she said. "You're winning this quietly." "Quietly's enough," I said. That night, I sat in bed with Scout at my feet, and Chloe asleep down the hall. The house was still the same, the creaky floors, the hum of the fridge, but it finally felt like mine. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I just exhaled. Outside, the porch light flickered again, same as always. But this time, it didn't feel like a warning, it felt like a signal. A few weeks later, Ethan's charm started to wear thin in all the places he'd once felt untouchable. Redwood Realty officially terminated his contract for ethical violations, a phrase that spread through town faster than wildfire. By the time he tried to land another job, the whispers had already reached every recruiter within 50 miles. He called me one afternoon, his voice unusually quiet. "They're blacklisting me," he said. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened to the silence on the line. "You could have told them it wasn't that bad," he continued. "You could have said we were working on things." "We weren't," I said calmly. "And it was that bad." He exhaled hard, the kind of sigh that used to make me flinch. Now it just sounded small. "You really hate me that much?" "No," I said. "I just stopped protecting you." All Evans. He didn't have a response for that. The following week, Vanessa's husband filed for divorce. Apparently, someone definitely not me had sent him screenshots of text messages and photos that made his decision very easy. Redwood's HR department reported both of them to the corporate board, and she lost her position too. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Karma was doing its paperwork, and it was thorough. Meanwhile, life in my house grew quiet, peaceful. I started taking long walks with Scout in the evenings, rediscovering parts of the neighborhood I'd ignored for years. People looked at me differently now, not with pity, but with something closer to respect. Maybe it was because I stopped shrinking myself to make others comfortable. One afternoon, I bumped into Denise again. She gave me that cautious smile people use when they're unsure which version of you they're talking to, the broken one or the survivor. "You're holding up really well," she said. "I'm not holding up," I said. "I'm just done holding back." She laughed awkwardly, not sure if that was meant to be deep or dangerous. "Well, good for you. I heard Ethan's been staying at a motel out on Lincoln Highway." "I heard that too," I said, sipping my coffee. The truth was, I'd driven past that motel once, just to see for myself. His truck was parked outside room 12, peeling paint, flickering light, broken vending machine in the lot. It fit him now. A man surrounded by half-finished things. That weekend, he showed up again. No warning, no call, just his car pulling into the driveway like nothing had changed. I watched from the window as he sat there, hands gripping the wheel, trying to summon the courage to knock. When he finally did, I opened the door just enough to see his face. He looked tired, older. Guilt does that, it ages faster than time. "I just wanted to talk," he said. "Please." "Make it quick," I said. He stepped inside, glancing around like he was visiting a museum of his own mistakes. "You redecorated," he said softly. "Just cleaned," I replied. "Turns out, the place looks better without lies in it." He winced. "I deserve that." "Yeah," I said. "You do." He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. "I can't get another job. I'm out of money. I don't even know who I am anymore." "That's the first honest thing you've said in a while." He looked up at me. "I miss you." "And teen." I crossed my arms. "You miss the life you destroyed. There's a difference." His eyes watered, not tears of remorse, just self-pity. "I never meant to hurt you." "Intent doesn't erase impact," I said. "You meant enough to cheat, to lie, to gaslight me. You just didn't expect to lose." He nodded slowly, the truth sinking in. "You're not the same woman I married." "You're right," I said. "That woman would have forgiven you." He stood up, defeated. "So this is it?" "It was it the moment you laughed at me for asking about that text." He didn't argue. He just nodded and left, his steps heavy and aimless. I closed the door behind him, locking it out of habit more than fear. Scout padded over, resting his head on my knee, as if sensing the finality in the air. That night, I sat outside on the porch, the autumn wind brushing through the trees. Somewhere down the street, kids were playing, laughter echoing like proof that life went on regardless of heartbreak. My phone buzzed a text from Tessa. "Heard Vanessa moved to Arizona. Her husband took the house. Justice has taste." I smiled. Karma's efficient when you stop getting in its way. For the first time in months, I felt peace, not the forced kind, but the kind that comes when everything false finally falls apart. I looked at the night sky, stars barely visible above the streetlights, and thought, I don't need revenge. I just need closure that sticks. Then I turned off my phone, went inside, and slept without dreams. The funny thing about peace is that it doesn't show up with fireworks, it just sneaks in one day and sits quietly at your table, like it's always belonged there. That's how it felt waking up in that same house, but this time, without the weight of someone else's lies pressing against the walls. I started small. I replaced the curtains, repainted the living room, and threw away everything that carried his energy, the cufflinks he'd left on the dresser, the monogrammed towel he thought made him sophisticated, even the coffee mugs with our initials. It wasn't about spite. It was about reclaiming space. Every item that left the house made breathing a little easier. Chloe noticed it too. She stopped tiptoeing around, stopped watching my face like I might break at any second. One evening while we were eating pizza on the couch, she said, "You laugh different now." "Different how?" I asked. "Like you mean it." I smiled. Guess I finally earned it. She nodded, chewing thoughtfully. "Dad called," she added quietly. "He asked if I wanted to visit next weekend." I waited. "Do you want to?" "I don't know," she said. "I'm not mad anymore. Just done." "That's fair," I said. "You don't owe him anger or forgiveness. You just owe yourself peace." She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You sound like a therapist." "Probably cheaper than one," I said, and we both laughed. After she went to bed, I sat at my desk and opened the folder labeled Final Divorce Decree. The paperwork was clean and cold, just like the truth had been. My name stood alone again. Olivia Grant. No hyphen, no attachments, just me. Work became my anchor. Teaching art felt different now, freer, somehow. My students noticed. One of them, a quiet kid named Avery, stayed after class one day. "You seem happier," they said shyly. "I am," I admitted. "You'd be surprised how much lighter life gets when you stop carrying other people's lies." They grinned. "I like your new hair." "Thanks," I said. "It's called a midlife crisis, but in a good way." Oh? Outside of school, I joined a weekend pottery class. I hadn't touched clay since college, but it came back naturally, the mess, the patience, the rhythm of creating something from chaos. One Saturday, the instructor said, "You've got a steady hand. You sure you're not a professional?" I smiled. "Just practiced at rebuilding things." By spring, I'd started selling my pieces at the local market. Small bowls, vases, things that looked fragile but weren't. A woman once picked one up and said, "This one feels calm." "That's the idea," I told her. It felt strange, making something that would outlive the hurt. But maybe that's what healing really is, quiet creation in the space where destruction used to live. Ethan called less and less. The last time he did, it wasn't about money or guilt. It was about acknowledgement. "You seem different," he said. "I am." He hesitated. "You know, I thought you'd try to ruin me." I almost laughed. "I didn't have to. You did it yourself." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You were right. About everything." "That's new," I said. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I believed him for the first time, maybe. But believing didn't mean forgiving. "I hope you figure yourself out," I said. Because I already did. After that, he stopped calling altogether. That summer, I hosted a small gathering at my house. Friends from work, Tessa, a few neighbors who'd stuck by me through the storm. There was laughter, real music, the smell of grilled vegetables instead of anxiety. At one point, Tessa raised a glass and said, "To Olivia, who rebuilt her life from ashes and made it look easy." I laughed. It wasn't easy. I just stopped apologizing for surviving. The room clapped, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was performing strength. I was just living it. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood on the porch with Scout by my side. The moon was bright enough to paint silver lines across the yard. I thought about everything that had happened, the text, the lies, the unraveling, and realized it all led here. To this peace. To this version of me. I whispered into the still air, "Thank you for leaving when you did." The world didn't answer, but the quiet did. It didn't need to. It already knew. The first time someone told me I was strong, I almost laughed. Strength wasn't what carried me, it was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that forces you to stop chasing closure from people who will never give it. But somewhere between signing those papers and building a new rhythm, strength quietly moved in and made itself at home. One Friday, Tessa dropped by my classroom with a coffee and a grin. "Guess who made the paper?" she said, holding up her phone. There it was, an article from a local business site, Former Redwood Executive Faces Lawsuit After HR Scandal. Ethan's name was buried in the middle, but it was enough. I read it once, then handed her the phone back. "Karma works overtime." "Maybe," she said. "But you gave it good material." That night, I sat on my porch, watching the last bit of sunset slide behind the rooftops. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. That chapter was done. What stayed with me wasn't the betrayal, it was the rebuild. The quiet power of surviving what was meant to humiliate me. When people stopped whispering and started asking questions, I didn't tell them the drama. I told them the truth. He cheated, I left, I learned. That was enough. No bitterness, no tears. Just a fact filed under things I no longer owe anyone an explanation for. Work became more than work. I launched an after-school art program called Reclaiming Grace for students who'd been through family chaos, divorce, loss, the kind of pain that makes kids think it's their fault. Watching them create, seeing how art gave them a place to put their pain, reminded me why I stayed in education. It wasn't about teaching perspective lines, it was about teaching perspective itself. One girl, Haley, stayed after class one day, her voice small but steady. "My mom says you're brave," she told me. I smiled. "I just decided not to stay broken." "Is that hard?" she asked. "Every day," I said. "But it's worth it." At home, I kept a small clay bowl on the kitchen counter, one of the first I made after the divorce. It wasn't perfect. The glaze cracked in one corner. A reminder that even when something's flawed, it can still be beautiful. That bowl became my little daily metaphor. Sometimes, when the house got too quiet, I caught myself thinking about Ethan not out of longing, but out of disbelief that I ever lived for his approval. He used to tell me I was too sensitive, that I overreacted. Now I realized I wasn't overreacting. I was reacting correctly to a man who couldn't tell truth from convenience. One afternoon, I ran into his mother at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable, shifting from one foot to the other before saying, "You look good, Olivia." "Better, actually." "Thank you," I said. She hesitated. "Ethan's not doing so well." I nodded. "That's between him and his choices." She looked down. "You didn't deserve what he did." "I know," I said, "but maybe he needed to lose something real to learn what value means." We said goodbye politely. I walked away, feeling nothing but relief. No anger, no gloating, just a quiet understanding that closure doesn't come from apologies. It comes from knowing you survived without them. Later that night, Chloe showed me her latest art project, a portrait of a tree growing through cracks in pavement. "It's about resilience," she said shyly. "It's perfect," I told her. And I meant it. Somewhere in that simple drawing, I saw our story: ugly roots, broken ground, and something still managing to grow anyway. When summer came again, I took Chloe on a road trip along the Oregon coast. We stopped at the same stretch of beach where Ethan once promised we'd grow old together. This time, I didn't feel the ghost of that lie. Just the wind, the waves, and the sound of my daughter laughing as she chased the tide. On the drive back, she said, "You seem really happy now." I am, I said, because I finally stopped living in reaction to someone else's choices. Back home, I updated the description on my art program's website. Under About the Founder, I wrote, "Reclaiming Grace was built on the belief that healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about creating something stronger from it." The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and opened the windows. The breeze smelled like rain and new beginnings. For once, there was no trace of bitterness in the air, just peace, steady and quiet. I looked around my home, my life, everything I had rebuilt with my own hands, and thought, this is what overreacting looks like when it turns into freedom. Then I smiled, poured another cup, and let the day unfold exactly as it was meant to, uncomplicated, honest, and mine. The last time I saw Ethan was on a rainy Thursday, About 6 months after the divorce was finalized. He showed up at the art fair downtown, where my students were displaying their work. He looked smaller somehow, same expensive jacket, but it hung loose, like it had outgrown him. He spotted me across the courtyard and hesitated before walking over. "Hey," he said, his voice unsure. "You look good." "Thanks," I said. "You look like you've seen better days." He gave a soft, humorless laugh. "Yeah, that's fair." I waited for whatever speech he'd rehearsed, but instead, he said something unexpected. "I wanted to say thank you." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For not destroying me," he said quietly. "You could have ruined me completely, but you didn't." I looked at him for a long moment. "You ruined yourself, Ethan." "I just stopped pretending it didn't happen." He nodded, eyes down. "I deserved that." A gust of wind blew through the courtyard, rattling the easels. Behind me, one of my students laughed as a gust flipped their canvas. Life was happening, no drama, no fireworks, just ordinary joy, and I realized he no longer belonged anywhere in that picture. "I hope you find peace, Ethan," I said. "But that's your work now, not mine." He looked like he wanted to say something more, but I didn't wait. I turned back toward the art tents, toward the world that still moved forward. That night, when I got home, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window with Scout curled at my feet. Rain tapped softly against the glass, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted by the sound. Peace doesn't arrive like a storm. It shows up like the absence of one. Over the next few months, Reclaiming Grace grew faster than I expected. The program got local news coverage. Donations came in from people who'd never met me but saw something of themselves in the story. Women reached out, teachers, nurses, accountants, mothers saying they'd lived the same betrayal, the same laughter that turned to mockery. One email stood out. It read, "Your story helped me walk away." I didn't realize how quiet life could be until I stopped explaining myself to someone who never listened. I reread that line 3 times, smiling. That was the moment I realized revenge doesn't always wear sharp edges. Sometimes it's just the soft, steady hum of living well. Chloe turned 17 that spring. She had her learner's permit, her own sense of humor, and a playlist that could resurrect the dead. On the way to school one morning, she said, "You know, Mom, I think you're the calmest person I know." I laughed. "That's because I already survived the loudest parts of my life." She smiled. "You should put that on one of your mugs. You'd sell out." She wasn't wrong. The following week, I started designing a new pottery-lined simple pieces engraved with quiet truths. "Peace looks good on you." Overreaction built this. "Truth ages well." They sold out faster than I could fire them. Apparently, people liked reminders that healing wasn't weakness, it was an art form. One evening, Tessa came over with takeout and a bottle of wine. "So, St. Olivia," she said, smirking, "you really never wanted to get back at him?" "Not really," I said. "He wakes up every day with the memory of what he lost." "That's enough punishment." Tessa raised her glass. "To poetic justice." "Ich klingt mina against hers." "To peace messy, hard-earned, boring peace." We laughed until the food went cold. The kind of laughter that only comes when pain has finally run out of things to say. Later that night, after she left, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. There were the early years, the vacations, the dinners, the smiles that looked real. I didn't delete them this time. They were just history, pages in a book I'd already finished reading. I set the phone down and opened the window. The night air was cool, carrying that clean smell that follows rain. Somewhere down the block, someone was playing soft jazz. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Scout wagged his tail, nudging my knee. "Yeah," I said, scratching his head. "We did good." The truth was, I didn't win because Ethan lost. I won because I refused to let him define what winning meant. I stopped playing his game and started building my own. As I turned off the lights and walked toward the bedroom, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Not the version he'd belittled, not the one who doubted every instinct, but the woman who saw the truth, stood up, and walked away. The reflection smiled back, quiet and sure. Because the best revenge isn't public humiliation or poetic karma, it's waking up every morning knowing that peace stayed and he didn't. And that's exactly how I plan to live the rest of my life. If you love cheating stories, revenge stories, and real tales of husband betrayal that end with strength instead of sorrow, hit subscribe and join me here. Because sometimes, the best stories aren't about revenge, they're about rising.